Okay, this is part two. So the soup's been cooking for just over 10 minutes now. I'm just going to give it a bit of a stir to help it along. Just make sure that everything's breaking down evenly. It's starting to smell a lot more like soup. Excellent. Okay, so keeping it simmering as it is. We've just got some bubbles and we can hear it cooking, but it's not boiling over. So I'm going to let it do another 10 minutes and then we'll check to see that the potatoes are cooked. Okay, so the soup's been cooking for 20 minutes now. And so I'm just going to check the potatoes to see that they've softened up. Now this will depend a bit on your pan, your oven, whether or not you cut the potatoes up really small. I could have done them smaller, could have done them bigger. So I'm just going to stab with the knife. So that's going in really easily. If you find that the potatoes are still feeling a bit too hard at this point, then you can just pop the lid back on again and leave it to simmer away for another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes. The longer you cook the soup, the better the flavour is going to be. It just depends on how patient you are. But do make sure you keep stirring it so that you know nothing's sticking at the bottom. So now that we know that that's softened up the potatoes, there's a couple of different ways that you can have your soup. You can have it as like a chunky broth, which is sort of what we have now. We've got these nice bits of softened vegetables, and then the tasty broth that they're sitting in. Or you can allow it to cool and put it in the blender so that you get a really, really smooth consistency. Or you can go for a halfway, which is what I'm going to do. So I don't have a blender today. I've got a potato masher and I quite like to have some chunks still in the soup. So what I'm going to do is just take it off the heat for a minute and I'm going to just work my way through the soup with the potato masher to just squash down all of the veg and just encourage a really creamy consistency whilst retaining some of the vegetables. Another way that you can do this is you can always put half of it into a different container and blend half of it and then put it back in together so that you get that kind of the thick soup with the lumps in still. But it's very much down to how you prefer your soups to be, and I think we're all a bit different on that. Okay, so this is working really well. It's good to know as well that you can do recipes without needing to have lots of kitchen gadgets. Okay, so as well as breaking it down, that's just making the actual liquid of the soup quite a lot thicker as well, which will be really good. When it's at a consistency that you're happy with, the next thing to do is to taste it and see if you need to add any extra salt or pepper. But be careful because obviously it's going to be very hot. That's really nice. That's got a really nice flavour. I'm going to put a little bit more salt in, but I'm not going to add any pepper. Okay, give it a stir. So as you can see, we've got a really nice chunky soup consistency there. Now I'm going to let that simmer away for 10 more minutes so that it can thicken up, and at that point it will be ready to serve. As I said, if you are going to put this into a blender, you will need to let it cool down before you blend it, so that will take a little bit longer. So if I was going to put this in a blender, I would leave it without the lid on for it to cool for a good hour at least, so that it's not piping hot, before blending it, and blend it in batches because you don't want your blender to be full. And then after that, you'll need to heat it up again to serve. So we're just going to put that back on the heat and give it a final 10 minutes, and then it will be ready to eat. Okay, so the soup has had its final 10 minutes. I'm going to turn off the heat now. And remove the lid. It's incredibly hot. And the kind of goldeny layer that you can see on the top is just where it hasn't been stirred for a few minutes. The oil from the butter has all kind of sat. So just give that a really good stir through, and you should be able to feel how nice and soft and silky that is. All the vegetables are broken down really nicely, so we've got a lovely thick soup consistency. That's ready to serve now. I like to have it with a bit of chunky bread on the side, and sometimes a sprinkling of cheese on top so that it melts in. And if you want to have some of it for another day, this should be enough for 6 meals. So what you can do is just let that cool down, put it into a tub in the fridge. Once it's had 2 hours out to cool, you can put that in the fridge, or in a sealed container you can put that in the freezer, and then it's safe to reheat it once more to eat again. So either in batches in the fridge and the freezer, or just in one big tub. But just make sure that you give it a bit of time to cool before you put it in there, no more than 2 hours. And I hope you really enjoy your leek and potato soup. Thank you.